Ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment we've all been waiting for. Well, some of you actually unsubscribed for this moment. And Adam, welcome to the show. This is Adam Kokesh, who is running under the Libertarian Party not for president of the U.S. He's a longtime activist like myself, and that's where I got to learn about him. About 7 years ago in Philly, I was organizing the March Against Monsanto, part of Occupy Philly, etc. And I went to a cannabis rally with my friend Poe, and you got arrested by the feds. And I was like, who's Adam Kokesh? And that is the day I learned about you. And here you are on the show. It's a pleasure to have you. How the hell are you?
Outstanding. As you can tell, I'm not in my typical, politician. Oh, I have blood on my forehead. I'm not in my typical politician costume here today. I'm out building a fence, actually, doing a little ranch work for my friends. I get totally suited up when I'm outside. No exposed skin, or as little as possible. I got my thick leather gloves, and I'm a little dirtier than I normally would be for such an interview. So thank you for everybody for bearing with me for my unpolitical appearance, but I think it is particularly appropriate given the nature of this campaign. As you said, I'm running for not president, and every time I have to introduce myself as a presidential candidate, I throw up inside my mouth a little bit, because you really have to be some kind of psychopath to want to be president of the United States. And while it is true that I'm technically running for president, it's much more accurate to say that with my platform, what we are doing is turning the federal election into a national referendum on whether or not the federal government should be allowed to exist at all. And when we are victorious with this platform, or if we somehow make the country ungovernable and the federal government collapses first under its own weight, one way or another, it will come to an end. We're offering the peaceful, orderly solution here. But one way or another, if it comes to an end through this bankruptcy process, then you don't get Adam Kokesh as president. That's not an option. My platform is we take the ring of power. I don't put it on.
Of course, when you get to the most important part, you froze up. Now, what Adam is about to say, because I watched this interview before, is that when you get the ring of power, you're going to throw it into the fire. Isn't that correct?
That's it. Day one, resign, and the federal laws are unenforced from the very beginning. The federal corporation becomes a custodial institution. I resign from the presidency to be custodian of the federal government, because someone's got to clean up the mess, and we take it through an orderly bankruptcy process that leaves us with 50 independent states and up to 562 sovereign native nations.
Sounds like a plan. Now, for those of you listening that don't know Adam Kokesh at all, let's just take you around the world here. Recently, you've been very active with Adam and the Man, which is your podcast. He also has
definitely versus. Careful there.
Adam versus the Man, meaning the government, which you want to abolish as president. He's got almost 250,000. Oh, you're over 250,000. You're just about 250,000 subs on YouTube.
Yeah.
Adam versus
and I don't get
Man.
Any views. Surprise, surprise.
AdamVersusTheMan.com is where your podcast can be found. And you are also on Twitter and Steam it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's some people have described me as the most shadow banned channel on YouTube with 250,000 subs, and yet only getting a couple thousand views per video. But I take that as a badge of honor. That we're a threat, that this is a worldview and an understanding of government. You said abolish government. And that's true in terms of what we're doing with the federal government here. But when you say what is government, if you define it as a coercive, unethical institution, that should be abolished. If you define it as how society organizes on geographic boundaries, then the question is not to abolish it, but how do we make it voluntary? And that's where localization comes in. Localization is how we get out of this Chinese finger trap, if you will, this predicament, this intractable problem of large concentrated bureaucratic governments that create inherently this polarization where large populations of disparate perspectives and views are kind of forced to fight over policy because one policy is going to be forced on everyone. And it's not a one size fits all solution. It's a one size fits the profiteers. And we're distracted fighting amongst each other instead of fighting our real enemies and getting to the heart of the problem of statism, of centralized control. So if we take the federal government through a bankruptcy process, we can do the same with state governments. And I think once we get government down to the county level, it's going to be essentially voluntary enough that we're going to have the kind of flexibility where government will form around communities rather.
So Adam's saying that government will form around communities, which you cut out here. That's why I'm talking over you. Is basically a type of anarchy. It's a type of anarcho-capitalism, so to speak. The federal government is the problem because, Adam, as you get down to the lower level, I worked in politics at the low end in Philly for about 5 years as an organizer. When you get down to the citizens that are running, that actually care, there is real change at that level. But as you go up the ladder, the payouts and the corruption and the multinational corporations that control the policy,
it scales up.
Yeah, it gets to a point where none of it matters, and it certainly doesn't benefit you or I.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to chart it on a graph, but I'm pretty confident you can say that government corruption grows exponentially with its growth of territorial control and the concentration and centralization of control. And reversing that trend is absolutely critical. Now, you use the term anarcho-capitalism, and I did identify as an anarcho-capitalist for a time, and I don't really object to the label, but I don't think it's accurate to describe what even it is talking about, which is better described as voluntarism, which is just ethics applied to politics. Anarchy, if you describe it as statelessness or voluntary government only, it becomes kind of a silly semantic thing because we're not going to stand around and say you're a voluntary organization. Well, you can't call that government because that's our word. No, nothing silly like that. But even capitalism, voluntarism, in contrast, allows for people to come up with alternative economic systems of whatever scale they want, as long as they're voluntary. So, if you're a gun-grabbing socialist who wants to live in a nudist commune in the woods and you get other people to form that with you voluntarily and you don't force it on anybody else, I want you to have the right to organize that. And I would go to the other extreme. If you're an ethno-statist who wants, whatever crazy utopia you want to try to build, I want you to have the right to build that as long as you're following this basic ethical premise that you're following the non-aggression principle. You're not forcing on anybody, and that anybody who's participating in your system or whatever system that you're trying to build is doing so by choice. And everybody has the choice then to opt out, of course.
Yeah, we fully support the non-aggression principle here at the Oppenheimer Ranch Project, where we're creating a miniature version on about 100 acres of what you're trying to describe to the masses through this candidacy. And what we're showing now to the public is the platform. I'm just going to read the first paragraph, and you can chime in on it. The platform is simple. When you're elected, you're going to swear in, walk into the White House, sign one executive order, and this order will lay out the process for dissolving the federal government in a peaceful, orderly manner, and then you'll resign as president, so to speak, throwing that ring into the fire. So state governments are going to be running because they're independent of the federal government. Things are not going to shut down. I love it when people are like, who's going to fix the roads, man?
Well, that's to me, this is, and I don't want to take credit for this idea, but certainly for this application being in the right place and the right time to apply it, this idea of localization really solves that problem. And by some perspectives, you look at this platform and go, well, that's pretty extreme. And it's not really extreme, but it is radical in terms of striking at the root of the problem, But the reason it's extremely moderate is that it really doesn't challenge necessarily people's concept of what a government is or should or can be at the state level. It just means that it's going to be that more customizable and set course for the direction for further localization as people are ready for it. And so when you look at the federal government versus the state and local forms of government, there are 22 million government employees in the United States at all levels, and only about 3 million of them work for the federal government. And in this bankruptcy process, the states are going to have the ability to hire really back as many of those as we want. Realistically, we're only talking about cutting about 1/10 the size of government, localizing its scope from this national level to the state level, and giving you the power at your state to decide how far you want to go with localization, or just even keeping things at the state level if that's what serves the people there.
Now, I love that you're on the show, because I'm a historian, and a lot of the mythology and history that I study for the channel has to do with societies and the collapse of them. And part of your platform here, you describe that this is an actual peaceful way to dissolve the government, because every other way that it happens in history, every 2, 4, 6, and 800 years, governments and societies crumble because of some type of collapse mechanism. It could be weather, it could be war, but they always crumble. There is no government that is still up and running for a long term. So this one is going to crumble. It's a fact. It is 100% going to crumble. How do we want it to unroll, or how do we want to roll it out? Do we want to be shooting at our neighbors, or do we want to work together locally and get rid of it peacefully?
Yeah, so I'd be interested to hear if you can come up with a better example in history, but I think the rise and fall of the Roman Empire is the best analog that we have to understand the dynamics that the United States empire, the federal government, is facing right now. But, you know, I think the Mark Twain quote, "History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes," is quite appropriate here. And I'd like to think of human progress as a kind of ascendant spiral, and there are cycles to it.
We love cycles, and as soon as you said cycles, the powers that be froze you up. So as soon as you come back, start with the cycles and the spiral.
So we can learn from this history that really is the course of human progress spiraling forward or upwards and onwards. And we can look at the dynamics of the Roman Empire's collapse and not say, well, that's how it's going to be, but we can learn from that and do better. And so understanding those dynamics, saying, you know, how do we evolve to the next phase? And also the American Revolution, and I think the course of human history in general, is one of decentralization of power, in the sense that we went from, whoever could pick up the biggest rock was in charge, and concentrations of power based on violence, to even today where it's more based on money and deceit, but eventually on truth and respect for individual human rights. You'll have a fully decentralized, voluntary, global concept of social organization. And the first American Revolution was people declaring their independence, saying, screw you to King George. We're going to be independent because we feel like it, because this is our right as human beings to declare our independence. Similarly, the American people right now have not only a right but a duty to stand up to the federal government and say, no, this does not serve us anymore. This does not serve humanity anymore. This institution is unfit to exist. And Jefferson said we should have a revolution with every generation. Obviously, we're a bit behind, but I would see that what we're talking about here is localization as the continuation of the first American Revolution, and dare I say, possibly the final step.
Well, when have we ever learned from our mistakes, first of all? And
the one thing we learned from history is that we never learned from history.
And second, if this generation were to revolt, they would be revolting for carbon dioxide and shit that doesn't even matter, that they call pollution, because they've been brainwashed, filled with lies, and and they have no real direction. So people think that plant food is destroying the earth when the real corporate hucksters pump out dioxin and all kind of shit in our water and are killing the earth while you're
Yeah.
being taxed for plant food. So what kind of revolution could we possibly get from the brainwashed masses that currently exist on this marble?
You know, that's an interesting challenge. And in a sense, it comes down to my longer term analysis where I have absolute faith in the progress of humanity, that we learn, we grow, we get better over time. Technology empowers us. And when it comes to the issues of global warming or climate change and pollution in general, the real framework for addressing this now is violation of individual rights.
They cut you off when you got to violation of individual rights.
To harm someone's health with pollution is a violation of someone's individual. It is a form of assault. And sadly, under our current system of governance, we don't have an adequate system of holding people accountable for assault when they're governments or government approved corporations that have limited liability and are protected from real accountability for that. So I think addressing that first is most important. And for everybody who is concerned about these issues of climate change, and pollution, I wouldn't say that I'm a scientist or that my scientific opinion is even relevant here, but that the ethical one is crystal clear. That regardless of what you think is happening to or with our planet, it is something that we are going to best deal with cooperatively through peaceful exchange, interaction, and innovation, not through a coercive government that will only slow that process down.
Yeah, this government is absolutely disgusting because of the things you just said. Most people that I call sheeple on the program, they expect that the water in Michigan coming out of the tap is not going to make their children retarded, and they continue to drink the water.
Whoops.
Yeah, and people go into the supermarket because of the FDA and the EPA, and they buy that cereal and they buy the baby formula for their kids because it doesn't say on it that it contains glyphosate and that it's actually causing harm. It doesn't say that because they trust this puppet government that is controlled by just a few multinational corporations. And that is the problem. This machine is keeping the masses sick, the masses dumb, and the masses brainwashed. And if we erase it, there will be literally a revolution in ideas and art and culture, and everything will blossom once this mechanism is crushed.
Well, hey, don't oversell it, man. I'm trying to keep it simple. Like, hey, can we just? And yes, I'm so with you. And if you go, well, if we're just able to get a libertarian with this message of the nomination, if we're able to get this idea into the debates in 2020, it's going to set us up to win on this platform in 24 if the federal government doesn't collapse first. I don't think we'll win in 20 without a black swan kind of event. We'll have a practical platform. We'll be ready to win, and we are running to win, certainly. But as a strategic objective, we only need to crack 10% in 2020 to set us up for a victory in 24. And I really do have faith that this idea, even just getting it onto that stage in 2020, just opening the Overton window to include localization, the philosophy of ethics and voluntarism, and the implications for challenging authority today. Yeah. Oh, man.
Every time it gets good, they cut you off. It's amazing.
I don't want to brag, too much about all the benefits of this platform and just resetting the drug war, resetting regulations to be, in line with state needs rather than federal special interest needs. So many things are going to blossom in light of this. But one of the most exciting things about this is that as the bankruptcy agent of the federal government, my fiduciary responsibility is to pay back the true creditors of the federal government. And that's the American people, not the foreign banks and foreign governments and foreign corporations who own so much of the debt on paper. No, that debt is essentially disowned from the very beginning. But what we're going to do, even to more broadly, and I when I say redistribute here, I mean stolen goods being returned to their rightful owners, not being taxed and redistributed through a socialist government mechanism, of course. But when we say that the American people are the true creditors of the federal government, that means you, as an American citizen, if you have a social security number, you have a right to your share of the assets of the federal government when it declares bankruptcy. And that includes all of the land that it controls, and especially in the western states, that is all going to be sold. All of the buildings and assets that are not turned over to state governments are going to be sold to the people for Americoin, is what we're looking at calling the token that we would distribute as a cryptocurrency, where every American by social security number would be issued 1,000 tokens. And you are reclaiming your birthright as an American also to your equitable share of natural resources. You will get to buy, if you want, a piece of land to homestead that you can build on whatever you want, and being able to give that back to the American people, that which has been stolen from us, our heritage, everything that prior generations have worked to build for us that has been stolen from us. Yeah, we're taking that back.
Abolish the Fed, period. And there's no other way to do it. You got to start money over so that it has real value.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It's worked locally. A friend of mine, Paul Glover, started the Ithaca Hour up in Ithaca, New York in the 1970s, yes. And it's still in use today. It's a local money that has real value. It's called sweat equity. You worked for it, you earned it, and you get the value in return.
Yeah, and it's been replicated in several places, and the only limitations on these things, are those imposed by legal tender laws, which is part of what's so brilliant about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin just in general, that you have a system of money that's entirely decentralized, that without shutting down the internet itself, the government can't touch, and it's like that concept that was proven with Ithaca Hours, and then. What was the one in Colorado?
I don't know. I'd love to know. But before we go, Adam, how can people get involved?
Throughout the country. It's really exciting.
How can people get involved with your campaign in the sense of sharing your message or donating? Do they just go to KokeshForPresident.com, correct?
Right. Well, thank you very much for asking that. And if people want the general website, it's thefreedomline.com. You don't have to remember how to spell my funny last name, but yes, if you're looking at it on screen, KokeshForPresident.com. You can donate. You can sign up to volunteer. Please join our email list. But there's one thing, first and foremost, that I need everybody who believes in this message, who wants to see this message get out on the bigger stage, on the national platform. The only way that you get to vote for me in the primary, that you get to vote for this platform, really, and if you go to the endorsements page, please, at KokeshForPresident.com, you'll see I'm not asking for personal endorsements. I don't want you to endorse me. I want you to endorse this line in the sand, this approach to the federal government applying a solution as big as the problem. The only way you get to vote for any libertarian in the primary is to be a delegate at the national convention. There are no relevant binding primaries other than the vote of 1,000 delegates at the national convention. And it's actually shockingly easy to be a delegate to the national convention for the Libertarian Party. If you're qualified, you're a state member, a national member, maybe your state has one or two little administrative hoops to jump through, and you show up at the state convention, you show up at the national convention, you can at least be an alternate, if not a delegate, just by showing up. And if you really want to be a part of that, please email us, send us a form, get in form from the website, contact form, or send me an email, adam@thefreedomline.com. We have regional coordinators and state coordinators covering the entire country now. and helping people get plugged in, walking you through that process of becoming a delegate. And that's really the single most important thing. But if you want to just donate, yeah, you've got the page up. I appreciate that. Of course, we take cryptocurrency, and we really appreciate all the support that we've had from the crypto community making this campaign possible so far.
Yeah, and no doubt. I told my subs last October when Litecoin fell to $29 to buy, and many of them listened, and now they're all up over 100%. And so they have twice as much money to donate.
Nice. Yes. That's as good of an endorsement for donating as I could possibly have on a show. Thank you so much for that.
So before we go, Adam, there's one important question I have before you win the Libertarian nomination and before you get to participate on the live stage in some of the debates. Do you know where Aleppo is?
Yeah. I am not now, nor have I ever been Aleppo. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Adam Kokesh, Finally Free America. Go check it out. Even if you voted for Trump, this is another option because you know that the government is corrupt. Come on. Even it doesn't matter what side you're part of. Both sides are part of the corruption. We need a new system. We need to decentralize money. We need to bring value back to societies and community. And we can do that starting here. Kokesh for President. Finally Free America. Do you have any parting words?
America is too good for this government. That's the only thing that's holding us back is this mentality, this identification with it. We are not the government. We are better than this. We can do better than this. We have to do better than this. This is the revolution you've been waiting for.
Amen. Thanks for being on. Guys, check out kokeshforpresident.com. Be safe.